Hi everyone, this is Nelly Mensa with SF Cryptocurrency Devs, and today I have Lennart Frantzell with me from IBM. He just gave a workshop on how to use Hyperledger Fabric to build applications on the blockchain super quickly. So we will chat with him today a little bit about that.
Great.
So thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit about IBM, what you do for them, and what is Hyperledger?
Hyperledger is a version of blockchain, which is very popular, open source, of course. And what I do for IBM is to travel around the world, and primarily the United States, and talk about what we're doing with Hyperledger, educate people, and also learn what they need from us, and carry their message back to our developers as well. So it's a dual role.
Excellent. So what are some of the most exciting use cases that you've seen for Hyperledger so far?
A number of exciting use cases, especially in healthcare, in trade, and really in innumerable areas. People are getting involved with blockchain and Hyperledger Fabric. You wouldn't believe how the traction it has. It's almost as if there's a little bit too much hype sometimes, and people don't really quite know enough. So my job is also to level set, to make certain that they know what they can do quickly and what may take longer time to do.
And what are you finding as some of the biggest challenges of blockers that companies have when they're trying to look at the blockchain, trying to figure out if it's for them? What are they asking you? What are they worried about?
No, that's a very good question. There are a number of answers to that. Whenever I talk to larger companies, they all say, oh yeah, blockchain. We have had a user group or working group working on that for the last year. I haven't been to any large company who hasn't answered that. So they are with it. They really understand how important it is, and they understand that they need to get started with it, and they have started with it. When they say, can we help you with anything to make you make it quicker for you to progress? They say, no, we're doing fine, no problem. We know what we're doing. And so that's very good. It's very positive. It's not that I had expected them to be, kind of clueless.
Right.
They're not clueless. I think this cluelessness is more you find in the startup community, where people are falling for the hype and say, we want to do something cool, we want to do blockchain.
Okay.
And I think that's the wrong way to start. You should start understanding what blockchain is before you say we're going to use it.
Right. And so you feel like there's groups out there that are thinking of applications that are not suitable for the blockchain, for example?
Very much so, very much so.
Can you give us a couple of examples? You mentioned a few during your talk.
Well, especially there are a number of them. Let me take the example of healthcare as an example. Healthcare is eminently suitable, but you have to be aware that it's heavily regulated as well.
Correct.
So it's not something you can do something quick and dirty in, say, 6 months and get funding and continue.
Right.
And those are you have to know your domain. And many of the startup companies, I feel, or I may be wrong in that, do not quite understand the domain to the depth we have to understand what technology you can use. If you can use something else, in a sense, use what you're familiar with. But if you know that you can't use what you're familiar with, use Hyperledger Fabric.
Yep.
And that should be the approach, in my opinion, because otherwise you can get burnt.
Yeah.
And once you get started, and that's happened to some people I've talked to that they didn't realize it was so hard, difficult, and half a year later they are at their wit's end. Not because it's hard, but because they didn't do their due diligence at all.
In terms of understanding the industry and the space, or
Yes.
understanding the blockchain technology itself?
No, yeah, both, but primarily in industry and space. Because
Yeah.
the industry and the space can be more complicated, and it's not as sexy to know
Right.
as blockchain.
Right.
So
You have to be an expert in your field, first and foremost.
You really have to be
Yeah.
that, and the field doesn't change very quickly. So if you could be successful in the field with traditional technology, it's not terribly plausible that you can be successful in the field
Totally.
with totally new technology without something else having changed.
For sure. So another interesting question actually that comes up, so you mentioned health records, right? And you also talked about GDPR earlier.
Correct.
So what are your thoughts on kind of the paradox between GDPR and the right to be forgotten and an immutable ledger?
Yeah, exactly. And I talked about that. And there's something called a global state database, and you can actually finesse this thing and make me be allowed to be forgotten on the blockchain without changing the chain itself, but changing pointers to it, shall we say.
Right.
And this is an interesting situation because it shows that you can actually solve problems with the blockchain that people before thought could not be solved. Because
Totally.
blockchain is very new, and some innovation goes a long way.
Right.
And we're finding that more and more that the people in this space are really smart. And there are very few things that are impossible to do with anything, really. If you really put your mind to it, And that's what they've done with
Yeah.
GDPR and right to be forgotten. So it's a very, very good use case to look at and see if we can do this, but maybe we can do some other things too that people thought were impossible with
Yeah.
blockchain.
And that's actually a great example, which leads me to my next question is there's also a lot of resistance, I think, in the startup community against larger corporations doing blockchain because they feel that those projects go against the basic philosophy of open source, completely public. So are there any other myths that you want to dispel around the Hyperledger project?
Well, I talk to lots of people, and I've been always kind of nervous talking to very large companies because I know they have very smart people. And I thought, first of all, they always said, well, we don't really know what blockchain is and so forth. Instead, I get a totally different response. We know what blockchain is. We have a group working on it for a year. We know everything about it. They don't use that kind of simple words, but I mean, we know about it. And thank you we'll call you when we need you, so to speak.
Got it. So like we're good.
They're
We're
good,
on it.
and
Okay.
all the information I get from them tells me that they're telling the truth. They really are good. They can answer any question I have, and these are large companies. So the large companies get it. It's more of a matter of, I think, enthusiastic programmers and startup companies who have, for all the good intentions they have, maybe haven't always understood that you have to understand your domain. And your domain may be kind of boring
Right.
and not very sexy to understand. But unless you understand the domain and the dimensionality of the domain, what you have to understand, what you have to do with the domain, you may fail. And because you have a very short runway anyway.
For sure. And then in terms of actually getting enthusiast developers working on Hyperledger and especially Hyperledger Fabric, what resources are available to them to get started?
Well, IBM has a number of resources on our website, and especially we have sample applications, also called code patterns. And the code patterns are fantastic. They're out on GitHub. It's free for you to use. If you use them, we love you. And if you fork them and put them back, so we can reuse them as well, you become our heroes.
Excellent.
And it's all free. It's all free.
Right.
And it's really totally above board. And that's a very good way to get started because then you get known by the developers.
Yep.
If you're good, and it's always good to be known by a corporation for being a good developer, right?
Of course, for
So
sure.
that's the game,
Yeah.
so to speak, the method I will go about doing it. And people don't seem to realize what a weapon for their good
Right.
that is really, but it really is.
Yeah.
GitHub is your friend.
That's awesome. Yeah, GitHub is everyone's friend for sure.
Right.
Much loved in the community.
Absolutely
Yeah.
is.
So to wrap up, I know there have been a couple of high-profile announcements about Hyperledger in the news, some big partners being announced, both in terms of companies that are now using the Hyperledger blockchain for various applications, as well as partners in the ecosystem. So can you tell us kind of what's down the road for you guys and what you're most excited about?
I think blockchain is Hyperledger Fabric is being maturing more and more. We're taking on more and bigger projects, and we have lots of you go use cases. So the starting point now is to go through our use cases, and primarily also our blockchain in the IBM cloud, because that is a big. That wasn't available even for a few months ago. Now it is available, and you can therefore deploy your application in the cloud, and that's a way to go into the Hyperledger Fabric for the enterprise.
For sure.
Because enterprises really need a cloud deployment,
Yeah.
and now we have that. So that's a really a major threshold that we have passed, and there will be more coming. And the point is also that they're all announced because it's open source. They're all open source. You can see what's going on by looking on our GitHub repo.
Awesome. Very cool. Lennart, thank you so much for your time, for the great talk, and for this interview. If you want to find out more about IBM Hyperledger, check out the GitHub, check out more information about it, and thank you so much for being here.
And thank you for having me.
Of course.
Great.